With the first selection of the 2019 MLB Draft, the Baltimore Orioles select Remember That Guy, the podcast where we mine our memories for nuggets of nostalgia about peripheral players past and present. Hey there, everybody. I'm James. I am, as always, joined by
Diaz with you once again, and we're with the person who was number 2 on the Orioles board that year, just behind Adley Rutschman. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, you know what? They should have drafted me. I bet you I would have gotten to the majors before this year because I'm so terrible they would have had no reason to hold me back to manipulate service time. It is me, the special guest Xavier.
Yeah, Xavier. It's I gotta say, it's wild when your prized rookie comes up at the age of 24. Man, sure do wish I could have been rooting for this guy sooner, but sure enough, last week the episode came out slightly later than usual because Saturday night I got to go to Adley Rutschman's rookie debut after complaining that he had not debuted yet. So that was, I think, a perfectly worthwhile reason to not edit it. But the person that was making memories for you, there was a huge debut from Adley Rutschman. But I do also want to talk about another rookie debut for the Orioles that evening. My man, my seat neighbor, a little friend of mine by the name of Jackson. Do I know Jackson's last name? No. And even if I did, I do not think I would say it, even on this very not particularly listened to podcast. But first game ever, his favorite player, Adley Rutschman, not because of any of Adley Rutschman's hype, just because it is also Adley Rutschman's first game ever. He thought that was really special. He did not seem to necessarily understand the stakes of the matter, and I think that's just great. Here's the final line for Jackson for the night. Made it through 7 innings of the game before having to go back home, because he did, of course, have flag football and swimming the next day. What a titan. In that 7 innings, he polished off 2 chicken tenders, several fries, a mini baseball cap of Dippin' Dots, and successfully used the phrase can of corn, which was taught to him by me in the 2nd inning 3 times throughout the course of the game. Absolutely thrilled to do it every time. Jackson, I hope you're still calling can of corn. Watch the game at Masson now. What a great debut. Adley Rutschman also hit a triple, and it was a religious experience for me. And that's what's making memories for me right now.
I'm so happy for Jackson. I'm so happy for you, too, because, for the Orioles, the parallel I would make, I went through the process with the Sixers. Many down seasons. Just waiting, hoping that maybe one day Joel Embiid would actually take the court for the Sixers. And once it was clear, okay, this is the year he's healthy, I sprung on tickets for the Thunder. I had to be there at the debut. So it doesn't surprise me one bit that you found a way to make your way down there. And what a blessing to be seated next to Jackson and take in that game with Jackson for his first game. There's something about seeing little kids at sports games just getting hype as shit, man. It's like, you poor, sweet child, you have not yet had your heart ripped out thousands of times by this franchise.
He was so loud. I remember being able to scream that loud for the entire game, and I pride myself on being a pretty loud guy at the game, but just absolutely titanic vocal cords. And yeah, they were originally going to leave after the 6th inning, and then they realized, you know what, Adley Rutschman's up to bat first. Let's go ahead and see what happens. And then, of course, he did hit a triple, and the Orioles did strand him on third, because they are still the Orioles.
Hey, Sixers lost that first game even though Embiid was hitting bucket after bucket in the 4th. It's a reminder of what can be, while also a reminder of what still is.
Well, and speaking of what still is, how are you guys doing right now? Who's making memories for y'all?
So, as we are recording right now, the Rangers are in Game 5 of the Eastern Conference semifinals against the Carolina Hurricanes. Igor Shesterkin is back to being incredible. They won the 2 games in New York, which also means that Carolina has started off the playoffs with 11 games where the home team won every single game, which is tied for a new record. I hope that record does not get broken today, because I would like it if the Rangers were to win. But more important than the Rangers, and more important than really any sport, today the Tampa Bay Rays and the New York Yankees, instead of tweeting live coverage of the game that they are having between them, are instead tweeting out statistics on gun violence at the top of every inning instead. This is the 4th inning of the game. Things that they have tweeted are, every day more than 110 Americans are killed with guns and more than 200 are shot and injured. Firearms are the leading cause of death for American children and teens in 2020. 58% of American adults or someone they care for have experienced gun violence. And an average of 4,500 veterans die by firearm suicide every year, about 12 veterans each day. And the reason they are tweeting about this is because we are only 2 days removed from the horrible massacre in Uvalde, Texas, which I do not want to talk about further, but I'm very appreciative of the Yankees and Rays taking the platform they have to, instead of talking about, a game for children that they happen to get paid to play, and instead talking about something important. But also, sorry for being a downer.
No, it's crazy that we don't really even have time to fully process Buffalo, and then Uvalde happens, and it's always something. I loved Steve Kerr's passionate plea in his press conference before Game 4 of Warriors-Mavs, and then he stormed out. I don't know. I am hopeful that something will be different this time. We'll see. But on to brighter things, and on to brighter things across the pond, where they have common sense gun legislation. What they also have is a team up in the northeast of England, the Newcastle United Football Club, with a great win, 2-1 over Burnley, to conclude the Premier League season. They officially finish 11th in the table after 14 games having no wins. So the first team in the history of the Premier League to be winless through 14 to then not only survive, but they nearly finished top half, which is...
Yeah. Like, I looked at the standings the other day after you said that 14 winless streak. There's like 5 more teams beneath you than I expected.
It's incredible. It's
all thanks
unreal.
to Bruno G.
Bruno Guimaraes is my child. He's my uncle. He's my father. He's my twin. He's my long-lost cousin, who I have striking resemblances with. I love Bruno Guimaraes. But, I mean, just a really impressive win on the last day of the season. Burnley, with a win, would have survived and would have not been relegated themselves. So Newcastle really had nothing to play for in this road game at Burnley and just dominated the game the whole way. Burnley got one back after Newcastle went up 2-0, but never really threatened to equalize, obviously never threatened to reclaim the lead from 2-0. And it's a really, really exciting time to be a Geordie. Big summer transfer window. For the record too, so I'm gonna make a claim, and it's gonna sound ridiculous at first, but then I'm gonna say something that's gonna support it. Newcastle will qualify for a major European tournament next year. I don't think it'll be Champions League. I think there's a non-zero chance they qualify for Champions League. I think they'll make Europa, which sounds insane, except when you look at the second half table, so just each team's last 19 games. Obviously, City and Liverpool ran away. They were the top two. It came down to the final day. Dramatic title victory for City after going down 2-0, but it was between City and Liverpool, and as you would expect, they're also 1-2 in the second half table. Number 3, Newcastle. Newcastle finished third for the second half of the season. Now, some of that comes down to scheduling. Newcastle had a bit of an easier schedule in the second half versus a tough schedule in the first half that led to the no wins in the first 14. But 19 games is 19 games. That's half the season, and they were third for the second half of the season. So I think a top 7 finish, which would get them into European competition. I think top 7, it should be the goal. I think it is the goal, and I think they can do it. We bring in a quality striker up top to support Callum Wilson because he does get injured a lot. Get another quality striker to play up top with him, and I don't see why not. I love Callum Wilson. I love Alan St. Maximin. I love Bruno Guimaraes. I love Joe Linton. I love the hometown boy Dan Burn coming back to play for his own Premier League team as the tallest player in the Premier League. I love Ryan Fraser, the super sub that's the shortest
tallest
player
guy
in the Premier
league.
League. Dan Burn at 6'7" is the tallest player in the Premier League. And we also have Ryan Fraser, who at 5'6" is the shortest player in the Premier League.
Oh,
You're
God,
actually
that's
legally not
good.
allowed to just say Dan Burn. From everything I've seen, it's always Big Dan Burn. Big Dan Burn. You can't preface it without saying big.
It is Big Dan Burn. An absolute brute of a center back. I love him. I love Kieran Trippier. Kieran Trippier was our marquee signing at first, and then he broke his ankle. And then we were like, oh, don't worry. we'll get a new one. So we'll sign Bruno, and Bruno is just the star of my affection. God, I love that club. I love that club. I hope they still find a way to come to America. Their American trip might have been canceled because I think Villarreal pulled out. I hope they find a way to make it here, because if they're anywhere in the continental U.S., I'm gonna go. So, thank you, Newcastle. Thank you, Amanda Stavely. Thank you, Merdad Galusi. Thank you, Eddie Howe. Thank you, all of you, for turning this club from something that I was really regretting choosing them as my team. I had a choice, and I subjected myself to it. Oh man, what a turnaround! And I think the future's bright for Newcastle.
Hooray, oil money!
Listen, we don't need to talk about where the money comes from.
All the money's bad. None of the money is good money.
There is no ethical fandom.
There's worse money than some, but it's all bad.
Yes, none is good.
But you know what is good? I think what Xavier's got lined up for us this week is good. And Xavier, I would love for you to go ahead and introduce that to us.
Of course. So the topic that I thought would be fun to talk about today is hometown heroes. You know, these are guys who, they're never the best. Obviously, we're not looking for Hall of Famers when we talk about our guys, but people who stayed close to home for their whole career, never went too far, fan favorites, and had perfectly serviceable and happy careers staying in the same place. I want to start off by talking about Connor Lade.
Connor Lade.
Connor Lade was born November 16th, 1989 in Morristown, New Jersey, and grew up in the Convent Station section of Morris Township. Fun fact, I have been there many times, as I have family there, and specifically my godfather, who you both met at my wedding, the Shakespeare guy, the older gentleman who is a theater actor and English professor who loves Shakespeare.
I certainly hope that I had an extended conversation. He sounds phenomenal.
I'm terribly sorry that you have family in New Jersey, Xavier. That's really
I have lots of family in New Jersey, but specifically this one family is in Convent Station over in Morristown. Lade attended Morristown High School, where he was a standout defender on the soccer team with 3 all-state selections, and he grew up as a big fan of the New York, New Jersey Metro Stars / New York Red Bulls, and frequently went to games at the Meadowlands, which is just 30 minutes away from Morristown. In 2006 and 2007, he was named to the Super Y ODP National Select Team for amateur youth soccer. Then he committed to attend St. John's University in Queens, New York. His coach at St. John's, Dave Masher, told me that he wanted Lade to try playing against tougher competition before coming to Queens. So on his advice, Lade attended a trial with the Red Bulls. After a successful showing, Lade joins the New York Red Bulls Academy for the 2007-2008 season. He plays for the under-18s in the U.S. Soccer Development Academy. They are 12 minutes away from his hometown. They play over in Hanover, New Jersey. And Queens is about 1 hour from his hometown. So still not very far away. But after this one season with the Red Bulls Academy, he heads off to St. John's. St. John's, he quickly solidifies a place in the team, ends up being a 4-year starter in defense. And now I should mention that unlike most defenders, talked about big old Dan Byrne earlier, Connor Lade during high school / college maxed out at about 5'5" and 135 pounds.
Now this is where I need to ask real quick, because I can see a left or a right back.
He is a fullback, yes.
Speedy guy. Okay. I was a center back. This sounds like a recipe for disaster.
He is a fullback, but there are a lot of really good videos of him just going up for aerial duels against guys that are a foot taller than him, charging into tackles against burly forwards that might have 60 pounds on him.
Does that go well for him typically?
He's pretty good. He's pretty good at what he does.
All I can envision is I'm thinking this is like the Steve Smith of fullbacks. It's like, I'm a little guy, but I don't give a shit.
But by the time he gets to his professional career, he maxes out at 5'7", 145. So he never gets much bigger than that. He stays pretty small compared to the people he's up against for his whole career. So in Lade's freshman season, he starts 24 games, is third on the team with 2,126 minutes played, and chipped in 3 assists as he helped St. John's to the NCAA tourney, where they beat Boston University, UC Irvine, and Indiana, and advanced all the way to the College Cup. They lost in the semifinals in extra time to the Graham Zusi-led Maryland Terrapins.
Go Terps! Let's go!
The
Fear the
Saints of
turtle.
all of Mexico, Grand Zusi.
Fear the turtle.
Maryland has good soccer.
We also have a phenomenal lacrosse team this year. I don't know if you know, but the Terps are absolutely going to win the lacrosse championship.
They made it to the Final Four. Penn's out now. That's the important thing.
Whenever I think of Graham Zusi, I just think about the Mexican commentators talking about how much they love him and that Mexico owes everything to him and that Mexican players didn't deserve to make the World Cup, but thanks to Graham Zusi scoring in a meaningless game for the U.S., they did, and that they love him. Fantastic commentary.
Yeah, it was. They called the game in Spanish, and then the guy cuts in, Graham Zusi, we love you forever.
They are, by the way, facing Princeton in the Final Four.
Beat Princeton, please.
Puck Princeton, as we say at Penn. I'm not talking about ice hockey.
The Maryland Terrapins do win that championship that year because Graham Zusi is very good. Next year, sophomore season, Lade starts all 21 games, leads the team with 2,036 minutes played, scores his first career goal against Syracuse, and then led St. John's to the Big East title, where he converts the game-winning kick in the penalty shootout against Notre Dame in the championship. They once again make the NCAA tourney. They do lose this time to Boston College.
We all hate that one.
Not done yet. Soccer is not a sport where most people leave early, so he's still got some time here. 2010, Lade continues to anchor the St. John's defense. Has 10 shutouts, leads the team in minutes played, third team All Big East, and second team All National Soccer Coaches Association of America, All Northeast. But St. John's does have a bit of a down year. He's still got one more year of eligibility. So in 2011, despite having the 9th best regular season conference record, St. John's goes on a tourney run. They beat Georgetown, West Virginia, Villanova, and then they cap it off with an extra time 1-0 win over UConn at the newly built Red Bull Arena to once again win the Big East tournament. St. John's gives up 1 goal in the opening game against Georgetown and then pitches 3 straight shutouts, with Lade leading the way. He was named the most outstanding defensive performer for the tournament, second team All Big East for the season, and first team NSCAA All Northeast. But Lade is not just playing college at this point. During this time, he continued to play with the Red Bulls Academy. He has his college season, and then he's also playing for the Red Bulls on the side. So he wins the USL Super Y League with the Red Bull Under-20s in 2009, and then played in the professional National Premier Soccer League with the Red Bull Under-23 squad. So he's both playing professional soccer for the Red Bull Youth Academy and playing college soccer at the same time.
Do the seasons overlap? Is it like a lot of extra work during one season, or does it make this more of a year-round season for him?
So college soccer is like a spring sport. MLS and other seasons usually go from spring to fall. So a tiny bit of overlap in the spring, but the academy seasons go longer than the college seasons.
They play in the fall. I did Penn broadcast in the fall.
Actually, you know what? I think you're right here because I know that the Big East Championship was November. So I believe you're right here. I believe that I'm thinking of something else when I was thinking about February games. So it might be academy in the spring and then college in the fall. Good call there.
Blacked out for a lot of those soccer broadcasts, a lot of those 0-0 double overtime ties, but I remembered enough of them.
So less than a month after this season ends, Lade signs a homegrown contract with the Red Bulls on December 5th, 2011, as the Red Bulls' 5th ever homegrown player. At this point, he had no idea that the Red Bulls were going to sign him, so it came as a pretty big surprise to him that they offered him a contract. They kind of just gave him a call and said, hey, we're going to sign you. I've briefly talked about this before, but for all non-MLS fans, there is a rule called the homegrown player rule that allows a team to sign a local player who played in their own academy and not have to go through the draft or other allocation processes.
I like that system. We've all, I think, said we're pro grow your own regional star.
Territorial picks.
Yes, it's like territorial picks, but also like how every other soccer team in every other country does things. America has to be different, which is why we have the MLS Super Draft. and then allocation rights and discovery and GAM and TAM and all of those fun things. But,
is there any reason for them to call it the Super Draft other than branding?
Nope, it's just branding.
Cool.
Homegrown players are able to sign to contracts that go around MLS's strict salary cap. It's restricted to players that are raised in that club's home territory and who have played at least a year with their academy. Shout out to original guy Juan Agudelo, who was the Red Bulls' second ever homegrown signing just a year prior to this. Lade, now he's playing daily at Red Bull Arena, just 30 minutes from his house. At this point, the furthest he has gone, other than away games, is an hour, which is Queens. So it's gone school, which obviously very close in his hometown. Red Bulls Academy, which was 12 minutes away. Queens, which is less than an hour away. And now Red Bull Arena, which is 30 minutes away.
This is all still like a bikeable distance even, man.
It's very bikeable, except for the fact that I wouldn't recommend biking anywhere in New York City.
Yeah.
Just for safety purposes, not for, ability to make that distance, especially, for an experienced cyclist like yourself, James.
New York feels like I would love to ride my bicycle in New York City, honestly.
You can do it.
For the thrill!
Lade quickly becomes a regular for the Red Bulls after making his debut in a 2-2 draw against San Jose on April 14th, 2012. He picks up his first MLS assist on April 28th against New England. He serves one up to Thierry Henry. Not a bad player to get your first assist for.
Like if Shaq showed up to like a pickup game, it's like, I'm just going to dump it down to him. And he'll probably figure it out. And I'll get an assist.
So he goes on to make 30 appearances that season across all competitions. He scores his first senior goal against the Charleston Battery on May 29th in the U.S. Open Cup with a curler into the top right corner from 27 yards out. He ends up with 8 clean sheets and 3 assists and finishes 5th in the Rookie of the Year voting. After that season, he gets his first U.S. call-up to the January camp and was named to the 23-man roster, but did not make an appearance in the friendly against Canada. Another quick aside, there is an annual January camp for the U.S. men's national team that is usually only MLS players because they're in the off-season and it's a way for them to keep fit and train. It's not during a FIFA window, so all the European players do not need to be released, so they do not come. So it's usually guys who will never or have a lesser chance of making the team in general, but they get a shot.
Oh, hey there. Didn't see you come in. It's me, James, editing the episode once again, and we do seem to have lost just a little bit more audio. Rather than bother Xavier to get that audio back, I'm just going to let you know that right here he tells us about Connor Lade getting loaned to the NASL team, the New York Cosmos. Now me, being a know-nothing about U.S. soccer, I have to ask, what is the NASL? And here's Xavier to give us an explanation.
The NASL is the second division of soccer in America. It's actually technically one of 2 second divisions in soccer. The minor leagues? Not really, because the NASL wanted to be its own separate league, because America is a closed soccer pyramid, unlike most other countries where you can get promoted or relegated. MLS is the only top tier league in America, so the NASL tried to compete as a second tier team, a second tier of the American soccer pyramid. Didn't end up working. The NASL is no longer here with us. The second level of the pyramid is now USL, United Soccer League, which has affiliations with MLS, and they used to have reserves teams. The U.S. soccer pyramid is really strange, but you could think of NASL as an independent second-tier league that wanted to be close to the first tier.
Okay, cool.
It's strange. There's MLS, USL Championship, USL League One, NISA, and the MLS Next Pro. There's a lot of things. American soccer is way too complicated. We took a thing that everyone had been doing for hundreds of years and said, we can do it better with insane rules that no one understands.
Yeah, the clock counted down at first in MLS, right?
It did, and
that's horrible. That's absolutely horrible.
There were running penalty shootouts where you instead of the ball's on the penalty spot and you run up and kick it, you would start 35 yards out, run towards the goalie, and the goalie could run out at you. And it was essentially a one-on-one.
Actually, the more I think about that, literally in like the couple of seconds that you've said it to me reacting now, I don't hate it.
It was actually
like
cool.
When you started describing that, I hated it. Now I'm like, actually.
So that's the thing. Everyone hated it, and then now kind of people are nostalgic for it, and some people are like, maybe that was a cooler way of doing things.
Grass is always greener on the other side.
But soccer is not a sport that takes change very lightly. And it's why it took a billion years to get any sort of video review, and why it feels like many countries are trying to sabotage it by being terrible at it.
There's one. We know the one that wants to suck at it.
England is very bad at the video review. Literally feels like they are purposely sabotaging it to try to get it to go away because they are so awful at it, to the point where no video reviewers from England were invited to participate in the World Cup because they are so bad. The largest league in the world, not a single one of their video assistant referees was deemed good enough to go to the World Cup at the end of this year. This has been a long tangent that does not need to, that has gone away from the main point. So Lade has now gone from 12 minutes away, to 30 minutes away, to an hour away, to 30 minutes away, to now about an hour and 15 minutes away from home. This loan spell, unlike most loans, does not actually last too long. This loan is for 2 months, and then the Red Bulls immediately recalled him, pissing off the New York Cosmos pretty badly because they expected to have him for the rest of the year, because they had some injury crises and needed him back. And then he goes on to score his first CONCACAF Champions League goal in a game against Montreal that October. Cosmos are pissed, but Lade is back at his hometown club and scoring important goals. So, still a win for him.
He's happy.
And the next season starts off as a reserve, plays a few games with the reserve side, RB2, once again, back 12 minutes from his house, before forcing his way back into the starting lineup by that summer. He starts 11 consecutive matches for the side that would go on to win their second ever Supporters' Shield. After a man-of-the-match performance in a 2-0 win against rival NYCFC on August 9th, where he smothered Frank Lampard and Andrea Pirlo, albeit older Frank Lampard and Andrea Pirlo. It's still Lampard and Pirlo. Coach Jesse Marsh said, "Connor has the heart of a lion. He just goes, steps onto the field. He's not afraid. He competes at every level. He's ready to run. He wants to gain an edge on every guy he plays against." And if you know anything about Jesse Marsh and any of the teams that he's coached, shout out Leeds United and Salzburg and Leipzig and the Red Bulls. He loves guys who will run and run and run and not stop running.
About that NYCFC team, I was able to do photography for a couple of their games. It was a really cool experience. When they had Pirlo and Lampard. Pirlo was slowed down, but was still Pirlo. Frank Lampard was collecting checks, man. Frank Lampard didn't give a fuck when he was in MLS. It was an embarrassment. But, not to take away from Mr. Lade, I just wanted to throw in Frank Lampard, goddamn embarrassment. As a player, as a manager now, fuck Frank Lampard. I'm sorry.
It's just funny because he was so bad he nearly relegated Everton for the first time in 70 years? But because he just happened to not be bad enough to get them relegated, he is now a hero to Everton, despite the fact that he put them there in the first place, which I find very funny.
Listen, if you're going to set the house on fire, you might as well put out the fire.
Lade keeps his place as a key member of the team, scores his first career MLS goal on July 13th, 2016, in a 2-0 win against Orlando City. Despite a torn ACL the next month, he does come back, regains his place in 2017, making 24 more appearances. Again in 2018, he's a key member of the team that wins their third Supporters' Shield in 6 years. He played a major role for the defense that only gave up 32 goals in 34 games and had 15 shutouts in the league and 21 across all competitions. Lade is one of only 3 players who was with the Red Bulls for all 3 Supporters' Shields that they won over those 6 years, which to this date are still the only 3 trophies that the Red Bulls have. 2019, He mostly splits time with Panamanian defender Michael Amir Murillo, but still scores the game-winning goal on April 27th against FC Cincinnati and starts in all 4 CONCACAF Champions League matches for the Red Bulls. After this season, 153 appearances across all competitions, 5 goals, 9 assists. Lade retires on October 23rd as the Red Bulls' all-time appearance leader by a homegrown player. His retirement, he said, I've definitely had a lot of highs, a lot of lows, but I wouldn't take back anything. I wouldn't have it any other way. It was an incredible run, and I'm just very, very lucky to have 8 great years with this club. It was a childhood dream come true. You pinch yourself just to be in that locker room, play with these guys, play for this organization. So for me, it's really special not only to represent myself, my town, my friends, but my family. This is what I want to represent. I want to work hard for them. Lade is beloved by his teammates. The amount of quotes I found about just everyone gushing about him, it's too many to say. But, one that I did like was former club captain and U.S. men's national team international, Sasha Question. I enjoyed being your teammate. To be honest, you're one of the best teammates I've ever had. You brought an infectious energy to training every single day that really brought the spirit of the team up every time. And current captain Luis Robles said, we all know that this organization is a better place now that you've come through it than before. Lade is one of those people that he never started all of the games. He split a lot of time as a reserve coming off the bench and then periods of starting. But everybody he played with, everybody who watched him, they all just loved this guy. And to really hammer home his connection with the club, his parents have had season tickets since Red Bull Arena opened in 2010. They kept their, quote, lucky seats, despite the fact that they could get complimentary tickets through his status as a player for those 8 seasons. He met his wife Morgan through the Red Bulls at one of his first media days after signing, and they had the gender reveal for their first daughter Avery at Red Bull Arena. Following a match against NYCFC while surrounded by his teammates, he kicks a soccer ball that explodes into pink powder. There's a video of it, and me, as a person who's not a big fan of over-the-top gender reveals, I still found it very wholesome and nice.
They're wholesome and nice as long as both parents are enthusiastic no matter what the result is.
And no one sets anything on fire.
Like, who was it? Was it Matt Stafford, Daddy's Always Happy? It was Matt Stafford. We're sure of that, right?
No, I'm not sure of that.
I don't think it was. We can't put false records out onto the airways. Gordon Hayward, noted piece of shit. Gordon Education Reform Hayward, of course. was very upset to see that he was going to be the father of a daughter.
Yeah, he sucks.
Anyway, sorry.
Lade was very happy, and there's also some really cool videos of him with his daughter when she was a baby crawling around on the pitch at Red Bull Arena. It's very nice. So during his career, Lade never played for a team that was further than 90 minutes away from his hometown. The Red Bulls training facility, like I said, 12 minutes away. Red Bull Arena, Harrison, 30 minutes away. St. John's, hour away. Even time with the Cosmos out in Uniondale, less than an hour and a half away. And the Red Bulls are currently building a new training facility that will actually be in Morristown, and it's just 5 minutes from where Lade grew up. Lade's time out of soccer does not last long, because on February 29th, 2020, the Red Bulls hired him back as the team's senior manager of alumni and player relations. He had a ceremony to honor him during halftime of the season opener the next day against Cincinnati.
I'm glad they got that celebration in time.
Yeah, they got in about 2 weeks, two weeks ahead of time. Lade said, I got to live out my dream by playing with my hometown team, and now the dream continues as I transition to the front office. I couldn't be more excited to help the club that I love so much, and I'm honored that they have given me this opportunity. I'll bring the same work ethic and enthusiasm from the field into my new role. As part of this, Lade does videos with current and former players, and he has done a podcast for the Red Bulls, which was initially called Red Bull Weekly, but was rebranded in March of this year to a bi-weekly show with a much better name, Laid Out. I am a big fan of Laid Out as a name for a show.
Love a good name pun, don't we? Don't we always?
The last thing I want to talk about with Connor Lade is, so I mentioned that they are, building a new training complex in his hometown. Of course, Connor Lade has to be the star of that announcement video with shots of him walking across his high school soccer field showing around the house he grew up in Morristown, and then walking to the pitch of dirt where they're going to be building this new state of the art training facility, because he is a hometown boy.
He's very loyal. I love that.
My native blood is the product here.
I love the defender that doesn't get glory but just does his job too, as just like a soccer archetype. It's one of my favorite soccer guys.
It's very good. He never an all-star. He was never first team Big East. You would think that someone who's good enough to play 8 years in MLS at least would at least one time make first team for a college team.
Yeah.
No, didn't even get that. Only one time got second team for that. So obviously he did get the little recognition of when they won the 2011 Big East tournament, but never got any real regular season recognition. But still made an impact on everybody.
Guy. Yeah, he's just a scrappy little guy.
Love scrappy defenders.
James, if you don't mind, I think I'd like to go second because there's something.
Please, by all means.
There's something from Xavier's that I thought will transition well into my guy. So Xavier mentioned that Connor Lade was selected to the Red Bulls as essentially the classic territorial pick. We've seen this guy. This guy's close by. We love him. We want him to stay. And that is how my guy ended up on the Philadelphia Warriors. He is a 1950 draftee via territorial pick to the Philadelphia Warriors. His number 11 is one of the only retired numbers in the history of the Villanova basketball program. A native son of Philadelphia, born in Philadelphia, lived his whole life in Philadelphia. And as named with this year's celebration, one of the 75 greatest players in the history of the National Basketball Association. Of course, I'm talking about pitchin' Paul Arizin.
I think this is one of the first times that we've almost actually come with the same guy. If I had not gone with someone from my area, I was looking real hard at Paul Arizin.
Pitching Paul. Well, so I mean,
this is great. I did not look deeply, but I saw just enough to get me excited for him.
Look, if there's anything that I missed, please jump in at any point.
I'm certain there isn't.
But Paul Arizin, born April 9th, 1928, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. As many great basketball players in the Philadelphia area will do, he did attend LaSalle High School. But notably, did not ever play one game for LaSalle High School. In fact, the only year he even tried out was his senior year, and he was cut. The only leagues that he was able to play in as a high school senior was, your classic intramurals. CYO ball is a huge thing in Philadelphia, which is the Catholic Youth Organization. So he plays a lot of CYO ball his senior year. Describes himself as an intramural all-star, but still not quite good enough to make it for the high school team. But with these CYO teams, they're not just a strict cutoff at high school. People will continue to play. And in fact, freshman year at most major universities, they'll have the freshman basketball team at this time. This is the late 40s. So they'll have the freshman basketball team, but they won't play varsity. And Paul does not play for the freshman team at Villanova, but he does continue to play for his CYO team. And Villanova's head coach at the time, Al Severance, is looking for all advantages wherever he can go. And he's watching a CYO game, and he sees this Paul Arizin. And what he sees in particular that catches his eye is the elevation that Paul is getting. Now, Paul, what really becomes his calling card as a player from a young age, he does this crazy thing. So most players at the time stay bound to the floor and put up a two-handed shot. So similar to, if you can envision Sean Marion, at least Sean Marion jumped. But imagine if Sean Marion doesn't jump and just shoots a two-handed shot from his chest. That's really the way to shoot a basketball at this time. They haven't thought it further. Nobody's thought of any way to innovate, and
this is where the infomercial crowd goes, there has to be a better way.
And in comes Arizin, pitching Paul, with this novel concept of, hey, what if I jump first and then I shoot the ball? What he claims was the genesis of this idea is a lot of the courts that he would play on, playing CYO ball, and anybody who's played CYO ball, or really anybody that has played in any kind of basketball league in the Philadelphia area will attest that these summer games get hot as shit. There's no air conditioning in these old Catholic gyms. It's hellacious. So sweat accumulates on the court, and whenever Paul would try to establish his base on the floor to get a good shot up, he'd slip and he wouldn't be able to get a good shot. But he thought, if I'm in the air, I can't slip. So he invents the jump shot.
Now, interesting that it would be easier to get the leverage to jump on a slippery floor versus just setting yourself.
Right. Well, if you're going straight up, you're going to be fine.
I guess if people aren't thinking to defend it, yeah, you can just kind of do that. You don't have to be cutting to the line the same way.
Right. And it's such a novel concept at this point. Nobody has any clue how to defend it. So Paul is a tall guy. He's at 6'4", but when he's able to jump, now all of a sudden there's really nobody that can guard his shot. It's like it's almost in a way it's the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar skyhook of the late 40s that this man thought to jump while shooting the basketball. But anyway, all of this to say, Al Severance notices this crazy Paul Arizin guy jumping and shooting with one hand too. It was not a two-handed shot. It was a one-handed shot. And Al Severance notices this, and he goes up to Paul and he says, "Son, how would you like attending Villanova next year and playing for my basketball team?" And Paul says, "Well, I'll already go to Villanova. I'm a freshman." And Al says, "That's fine. We'll give you a scholarship anyway." So with no high school basketball experience and just the CYO/intramural background to play going in through his freshman year at Villanova, he gets a scholarship offer. He ends up playing for 3 years at Villanova. First year, nothing too notable, but as we advance now to his second season, this jump shot that Paul has is an absolutely lethal weapon. In fact, in his junior year, his second season playing at Villanova, he establishes the Villanova record for most points scored in a single game. 85 points against the Naval Air Materials Center. And I want to be very clear, this isn't like the old name for the Naval Academy. This is the Naval Air Materials Center in Philadelphia, which is playing basketball games against colleges because they just did crazy shit like this back then. You played athletic clubs.
After learning about the Textile University of Philadelphia, I'm not going to assume anything about anyone's basketball pedigree.
Listen, you get any group of 10 or more individuals together in the Philadelphia area, they're going to start playing basketball. And unfortunately for the Naval Air Materials Center on February 12th, 1949, they were going against Pitch and Paul. Pitch and Paul pitches in 85, which to this day is still the Villanova record for most points scored. Still the record. The second closest was a man by the name of Bob Schaefer, who a few years after Paul graduated, scored 46 points against Baldwin Wallace. So this record has never even been threatened.
Oh, wow.
Nobody's even come anywhere close. So Bob Schaefer did that in the 53-54 season. Joe Lord in the 46-47 season, this was the record that Paul broke. Joe Lord scored 45, and a couple years after Paul graduated, Larry Hennessy scored 45 against Boston College. The most points that a modern player has scored would be Kerry Kittles on the 94-95 team, also against Boston College, with 44 points. Kerry Kittles, dare I say, one of the original buckets. That guy would have absolutely thrived in the modern game. He was a problem, he was a bucket, but what he also is a cause of my digression. So let's get back to Pitch and Paul. 85 was not the most that he scored in a game for Villanova. I should mention that as well. He once scored well over 100 points in a game for Villanova. However, they were competing against a junior college. So while the game against the Naval Air Materials Center is recognized in the official stat book, a junior college does not make the cut. So the 100-plus points that he scored is all for naught. Nonetheless, Paul has an incredible career at Villanova. His senior year, he is named the Collegiate Basketball Player of the Year. He is also unanimous All-American his senior year. And he led the nation with 25.3 points per game for his senior season. For his entire career at Nova, averaged over 20 points a game. And this is with the first 10 or so games of his sophomore year not really getting playing time. So a decent enough chunk of this bringing down his average. Nonetheless, still averages over 20 for his collegiate career. A damn fine accomplishment. And for Paul, he's ready to hang up the sneaks. We need to remember this is the time when professional sports salaries did not pay particularly well. And after starting as a chem major for his first 2 years at Villanova, he did switch to accounting for his last 2 years. Thought this was easier to manage with his basketball schedule now. Wasn't anticipating being a student athlete when he enrolled at Villanova. So he's got a chance to walk into a nice salary in the range of $3,000 to $5,000 as an accountant. It's really good money for the time. And Paul, when talking about this, says, I was more worried about my education, getting a good job. I figured I could play at the YMCA, but the Philadelphia Warriors are not worried about this. They used their territorial pick nonetheless to secure his rights. So now that they have his rights, again, accounting, business, what do you always do? You take the meeting. So Paul takes the meeting and he goes in and he says, look, I can make probably about $5,000 a year if I just take this accountant job coming straight out. I'm going to need you to double that. If you pay me $10,000, I will join the team and I'll come play. The owner said that if he gave him $10,000, the league will go bankrupt. Not just the team, the whole league will go bankrupt.
Wow.
Which maybe isn't that much of an exaggeration because the total team salary cap at this point in the NBA was $50,000. So he's asking for basically
20% of salary cap.
While there were no max contracts at the time, he's asking for the max as a rookie. But Paul, as a good negotiator will do, says, okay, well, if you're not going to meet my number, it's very fine. I have a great option to go be an accountant. About a week later, the Warriors do call back. They say, all right, Paul, we'll give you $10K. Paul still, he knows he's got him by the proverbial basketballs right now. And he knows he can squeeze out just one last thing. So he does get, as a signing bonus, the ability to attend any movie he wants for free at the owner's movie theater.
Oh, I love that. I would love that in my contract. It's so good.
He gets that thrown in, and now the terms are settled. Paul is ready to go play basketball. The original B-ball Paul, as I love Paul Reed these days. But B-ball Paul Arizin, ready to go, and he has some doubts about how his game is going to translate to the NBA. Will this crazy jump shot be as successful against professionals? Turns out it is pretty successful. So his rookie year, he averages 17.2 a game, and he is named the Rookie of the Year. Now, 10,000, he's still a business-oriented person. He knows in the summer, there's a chance to make some more money. So he works at Valentine Beer Distributor in Philadelphia during all of these summers while he's playing for the Warriors. So when he's not dishing basketballs into the rim, he is dishing cold gold goodness to the locals of Philadelphia.
Is he working as an accountant or is he just serving beer?
He's like dropping beer off like for all these people.
That's great.
He's just out there slinging it around. He wants to make sure that everybody is able to enjoy their summers with a nice icy cold beverage. As you can discern from this, Paul loved his beer, and to an extent that his health may not have been in tip-top shape, but we also need to remember this is the late 40s, it's the early 50s. You're not going to a doctor unless you're like on death's door, right? So throughout his career, he's noted for just wheezing and coughing as he goes up and down the court. He never went to see a doctor. He just dealt with it. Lord knows what kind of lung condition he may have had, but Paul would joke about it. He said, these guys would hear me wheezing and coughing, and then they wouldn't guard me as close, so that I could get my jump shot off. So to me, it was
galaxy brain shit.
So, look, like having lung disease to own my opponent and get in their head, why not? That is not a medical diagnosis. I don't want to be. Don't hold this podcast liable for what I'm saying about a guy who played basketball in the 50s. I will not be liable for that. Anyway, his 50-51 season, he averaged those 17.2 points. And coming into the second season, 51-52, he leads the league in scoring. He averages 25.4 points per game. So, second year, already on fire. Looking like we're going to have this incredible NBA career, except for the problem of the Korean War. So the Korean War is ongoing, and Paul is enlisted in the Marine Corps for this. But you may think as he's enlisted, he's not going to have as much time for basketball, and you'd be wrong. In fact, Paul, at the end of his first of 2 years of serving in the Marine Corps, each battalion has its own basketball team. and there is a Marine Corps basketball tournament of all the battalions. In March of 53, they go to San Diego to play in the Marine Corps Championship. And according to Paul, the stakes of this game were, if you win, you get to get stationed at a domestic base. If you lose, you're going to Korea.
Jesus Christ. Oh my God.
All the chips are on the line. And imminent threat of being shipped off to war.
How does Paul Arizin do under pressure?
Paul Arizin loves this pressure. And his team wins, so he gets to get stationed domestically for the duration of his 2-year term serving in the Marine Corps. Paul Arizin doesn't win that game, you know what happens. It could go to war, maybe you get shell-shock, PTSD, not able to come back the same player. But he wins the Marine Corps Championship, he gets to stay domestic, and after his 2 years, he's ready to come back to the team. The owner jokes that I don't know if he could play basketball as much anymore. And Paul says, okay, well, I want a $1,500 raise now. And he gets it because he's Paul Arizin. He's an accountant. He knows how the books are balanced, and he knows that the team is going to be unbalanced. They're going to be missing quite the scoring threat if he doesn't come back. So after this 2-year hiatus, he comes back for the 54-55 season, and he is second in the league in scoring. He's actually finishes behind his teammate, and again, this is the Philadelphia Warriors, dominant center. I'm talking about Neil Johnston.
Oh!
Led the league in scoring that year as Paul Arizin's teammate. We'll get to Wilt in a little bit. Don't worry.
Okay.
Wilt is a part of the story, but Wilt was not yet in the NBA at this point. Neil Johnston was, and Neil Johnston leads the league in scoring. So this is a potent 1-2 scoring punch that this year is not able to deliver the championship, but the next season gets some reinforcements. So for the 55-56 season, we get the addition of Tom Gola to the Philadelphia Warriors. Tom Gola, of course, the namesake of the LaSalle basketball arena. And also Ernie Beck. Now, Ernie Beck might not be a name that either of you recognize. I would not expect anybody to recognize that name. But Ernie Beck, until 2020, was the leading scorer in the history of the Penn basketball program.
Okay, so they're really just making an Avengers team of all of the best schools players.
All the Philadelphia boys are being brought home to bring a ring. And just the thing I wanted to say about Ernie Beck, I've met Ernie because the very last basketball broadcast that I produced at Penn, the very last Penn basketball game before COVID led to the shutdown and cancellation of the NCAA tournament, was senior night for the Penn men's basketball team. And AJ Broder was a 4-year starter for Penn, who entering tonight needed, I think, 15 points to break Ernie's record. AJ got 23, and in doing so, also recorded the first triple-double in Penn basketball history that night. But even that just to say that it took AJ 4 years of being a starter and not missing a single game to break the record that Ernie set in 3 years. So just a brief Penn Quaker sidebar. Gotta represent my Quakers. Go Quakers, go Ernie Beck, go Tom Gola. And with these reinforcements coming in, 55-56, they win the NBA championship 4-1 over the Pistons, who were the Fort Wayne Pistons at the time. Not yet the Detroit Pistons, still the Fort Wayne Pistons. Talking about it, Paul said, "Winning and making a positive contribution is the most satisfying thing I've ever experienced. We played good and we played hard." Now, this could have been the making of a Philadelphia dynasty, but as we all know, bad things happen in Philadelphia. Tom Gola gets drafted into the service, so this breaks up the potential dream team. But now, with talent going out, classic basketball thing, one great player leaves, shots have to go somewhere, volume goes up. For the 56-57 season, Paul again leads the league in scoring with 25.6 points. They do not win the title this 56-57 year, but he is named first team All-NBA for the third time in his career. It would be the last time he was named to the first team All-NBA. But for 51-52, 55-56, the championship season, and 56-57, he is named first team All-NBA all 3 of those years. His career high in points per game was in the 58-59 season. He averaged 26.4 points. But despite having led the league in scoring twice prior, this year he actually finishes second in scoring. Bob Pettit had 29.2 points a game, but the 26.4 was more than Elgin Baylor's 24.9. So still incredible numbers being put up. as we're entering now the later stages of Paul's career, after the 60-61 season, Paul has since moved on from Valentine Beer Distributor. He's now doing his summer work with IBM as an accountant for IBM, and IBM's ready to bring him in full time. In fact, they're ready to double his NBA salary. They really want him, so he's ready to hand him up. And the owner says, "Listen, I need you to come back for one more run, because I really think we can beat the Boston Celtics this year." This was Wilt Chamberlain's third season with the Warriors, so they'd gone knocking on that Boston Celtics Bill Russell door a couple times already. Weren't able to quite knock it down. And Paul, being the competitor he is, says, "You son of a bitch, I'm in." He comes back for the 61-62 season.
One last ride.
The last dance, the last jump, if you will. And the 61-62 season is notable for a few reasons. First of all, in the 61-62 season, the Philadelphia Warriors do play the New York Knicks in Hershey, Pennsylvania, towards the end of the season. And this is the 100-point game for Wilt Chamberlain. Paul Arizin starts alongside Wilt Chamberlain for his 100-point game. Scores a much more modest 16 on 7 of 18 from the field, 2 of 2 from the line. So Paul does put that up. Sure enough, wouldn't you know it, they meet the Celtics in the finals this year. They drop game 1. They take game 2. They drop game 3. They take game 4. They drop game 5. They win game 6. It sets up a dramatic game 7 with those Boston Celtics. After 3 quarters, the Warriors lead by 1. But in talking about this, and in talking about the Wilt versus Russell debate, most people, if you're making the Russell argument, you're arguing, oh, okay, well, they won. Russell's got the rings. Those Celtics teams had 8 Hall of Famers on them. And for those of you that don't remember at home, basketball was played with 5 players on a court at a time. The Celtics were bringing no less than 3 Hall of Famers off the bench for these games. So, of course, they do squeeze out a 2-point win, 109-107. Paul, unfortunately, has one of his worst games of his professional career. Shoots 4 of 22 from the field in this game. Does go 11 of 11 from the line to finish with 19 points, but 4 of 22 from the field. Not
atrocious.
Great. Not
I hope that there was none of that intentional fouling towards the end of the game, because if he was shooting that cold, don't send him to the line if he's 11 for 11. Just let him miss.
Right. I mean, yeah, 11 of 11 from the line. And, like, it's interesting because it's always like, if you're having a bad shooting night, go to the line. Get it right. Get your confidence up. It never felt that way for Paul in that game. He did try to make one last pitch to get him to come back, but the team was also moving to San Francisco. This is the Philadelphia Warriors become first the San Francisco Warriors before becoming the Golden State Warriors. And Paul says, absolutely not. I'm a Philly man through and through. His direct quote, "My roots are in this area. My wife's roots are in this area. I had to think of my family." And as mentioned, made far more money working for IBM than he ever did in the NBA. The most he ever made in one season in the NBA was about $30,000. And IBM was able to compensate him much more. So thus ends the NBA career of Paul Arizin. But I have some more things to say, because guess what? Paul Arizin had more shit to prove. He's still, as he's doing this full-time job with IBM, there are lesser leagues that are more regional in nature at this time. So decides to hop across the Ben Franklin and head over to Camden, where he will play for the Camden Bullets in the Eastern Professional Basketball League. He'll play 3 seasons with the Bullets. They would be the 1964 champions. He was named the MVP in the 62-63 season. Averaged over 20 points in each of those 3 seasons that he played for the Camden Bullets. Again, on a fully part-time basis. He's just showing up for the games. He's not practicing. He just shows up and says, "Hey, I'm pitching Paul. Are you not going to play me?"
I invented the jump shot.
The inventor of the jump shot. So yeah, was named MVP in that first 62-63 season. They win the title in the 63-64. He was named first team All EBL in 63 and 64. Only named to the second team in 65, which may have been the impetus for him to say, all right, if I'm not even first team in this minor league anymore, it might be time to go. So at this point, Paul does finally hang it up. For his NBA stats, at the time of his retirement, he had 16,266 points, which was good enough for 3rd on the all-time list, only behind George Mikan and Dolph Schayes. And so he was named to the 25th anniversary, the top 25 NBA players of all time. For the 50th anniversary, he was named to the top 50 players of all time. And with the most recent 75th anniversary unveiling, still considered within the top 75 players of all time. Just some more quotes to run through that Paul said about himself. I'd rather play a rotten game and win than play a good game and lose, because when you win, it erases all your mistakes. And that's the important thing. A team player. An early Tim Duncan, you could say. I didn't have a lot of great games. I didn't have a lot of bad games, but I was steady. That was how he liked to describe his game. Another thing, so when he's talking about his jump shots, he refused to hit a catch and shoot. He always needed it to be off the dribble. It would help him get his rhythm. So, dare I say, was he the first James Harden? Many people are saying it. And the other thing that I just want to mention about his jump shot is he shot very much as opposed to some of the more beautiful jump shooters of the modern day. Steph Curry, high arcing shots, Dirk Nowitzki, rainbow dropping in. Paul would shoot line drives, and this was not because he thought it was the best way to shoot. It's common science at this point that a 45-degree launch angle is the best ideal way to shoot a basketball. Paul's a lot closer to like 30, so a bit of a line drive. This was by necessity because, again, I'm getting back to the CYO roots. A lot of these church courts, a lot of the halls that they would play in, we're talking low ceilings. Like, the ceiling's probably about 12, 13 feet. So by necessity, he has to shoot the line drive shot. So that's really where it comes from. And this is an unattributed quote in the Philadelphia Inquirer, but just a beautiful turn of phrase that an Inquirer reporter came up with to describe Paul's jump shot. He said, "Flicking the ball on the crest of his leap like a man riding an invisible surf. This is Arizin's moment of expression."
Artful.
That's very good.
People don't write about sports like that anymore, man. And like fucking basketball is poetry in motion. Bring back describing jump shots like that. Just, I love it. Talking about his top 3 memories that he ever made. The first is the championship in 55-56. The second thing he remembers is that they didn't win more championships. The third thing that he brings up is beating George Mikan in the All-Star game, his first 2 seasons in the league. The All-Star came back in notoriety recently, I think, especially with doing the Elam ending for the last quarter. I really like that. But back then, like, the All-Star game was probably just below the finals in terms of intensity of the way these guys played because, I mean, there wasn't as much money at stake. So, as a competitor, you're leaving it all out there. Being able to beat George Mikan was right at the top. But the cherry on top, and the last thing that I want to say that Paul said is when they asked him the question when he was inducted into the NBA Hall of Fame in 1978, how do you reflect back on your career? And he said, "People ask me to describe how I feel. I think the easiest way is to put the question back to you. How do you think being enshrined here with all these illustrious names feels to a guy who back in high school was only playing intramural ball?" That really puts into perspective the work that Paul put in to master his craft, to invent this crazy concept of jumping and then shooting, which would come to be known as the jump shot. A Philadelphia icon, and one that, admittedly, before this, I didn't know anywhere near as much about Paul as I should have as a Philadelphia basketball fanatic. So, I mean, this was fun to learn more about Paul, and if we can consider Villanova part of Philadelphia, if we consider the Villanova basketball program part of Philadelphia, a Philadelphia man through and through, a man that refused to move to San Francisco and, in fact, would rather retire and leave his native Philadelphia, Paul Arizin is my guy.
Diaz, I am more than happy to count Villanova because Xavier was talking an hour. I think I'm still going to mostly be okay here. We're going to end up later on in beautiful Camden Yards in Baltimore, the home of the Baltimore Orioles. But first, we're going to head north up I-95 towards Aberdeen, Maryland, the birthplace of one Cal Ripken Sr.
Okay, all right then.
Cal Ripken Sr., not the Hall of Fame shortstop, Cal Ripken Sr., who was born in 1935 in Aberdeen, Maryland. He's born in the second floor of a general store owned by his grandparents Frederick and Afena, and he is born to parents Arendt and Clara. He's of German and Irish descent, and growing up, the whole family's starting to love baseball. His father, being, a German immigrant, here in the 40s is trying to, in particular, appear very patriotic, so he gets very into baseball. And eventually the brothers, Ollie and Bill, they start playing with the semi-pro team, the Aberdeen Canners. Now, sadly, Arend is killed in a car accident just before Cal Sr.'s 9th birthday. So at this point, the two brothers kind of take on the paternal role in his life, and they're going to keep going to the semi-pro team. They're going to bring Cal with them. So he starts at age 10 as the bat boy for the Aberdeen Canners in the Susquehanna League, except manager Fred Baldwin doesn't just have him serve as the bat boy. Manager Fred Baldwin is a little bit paranoid. He's worried that teams are stealing his signs. So he decides he's going to start relaying all of the signs to his pitchers and catchers through their 10-year-old bat boy, Cal Ripken Sr., who I guess is just Cal Ripken at this point. But Cal Ripken, as a 10-year-old bat boy, is responsible for calling all of the signs throughout the games for the Aberdeen Canners. He is going to continue with the Canners until 1953, when he's finally made the team's starting catcher. At the same time, he was playing for Aberdeen High School during the semi-pro team, 314. He's an honorable mention all-star in the Susquehanna League. I don't know how loaded the Susquehanna League was that a catcher batting 314 is only an honorable mention in the all-star team, but man, must have been absolutely loaded back then. And this is his senior year in Aberdeen, where he's also a star catcher, and graduates, turns down a scholarship from Washington and Lee because he wants to stay in the area. He wants to keep playing semi-pro because he is hoping to catch the eye of a professional scout. So he starts playing with the Havre Grace Cokers. This is another team just on the northern side of Susquehanna River. So he's within a 10-mile radius of, if you go to 95 now, the Millard J. Tidings Bridge. That's the one that goes across the Susquehanna. He's still on the Piedmont Plateau side of that, playing for the Cokers. That is, by the way, named for coal and not anything else, in case anyone was wondering.
Not from Atlanta.
No, not from Atlanta.
Company.
Yeah, this is for all of the quarry mining that they have there. He bats .380 while he's there. And there's a scout named John Polk Whelan. Something that I learned while looking up these scouts, there was a term for scouts back then that would stay specifically just in the regional area of the team, looking for like local stars. They were called ivory hunters. John Polk Whelan is referred to as an ivory hunter in the Baltimore Orioles organization at this time, when he does sign in 1957 his boy Cal Ripken Sr., who is immediately sent to the Class C Arizona Mexican League Phoenix Stars, where he is paid $150 a month and has basically $3 for meals every day. During this time, he decides, you know what, I'm doing so well for myself, why don't I get married to my high school sweetheart, Violet? And so after this one season in Phoenix, after which the Phoenix team does fold, he marries his high school sweetheart, and they go ahead and move on to the next minor league team that the Orioles send him to, the Wilson Toms, where he leads the league with a .996 fielding percentage and 60 assists as a catcher. He is not a very good batter, frankly. He is not a particularly good batter in the slightest, but he can catch a game. One way in particular that he demonstrates he really can kind of make his own as a catcher behind the plate. There's a guy in the Orioles organization at this time called Steve Dalkowski. He is referred to as maybe the hardest throwing left-handed pitcher of all time who did not make the majors. Never makes the majors because despite this absolute raw firepower that's estimated by historians to be somewhere between 100 and 110 miles per hour, like just absolutely insane pitches. An errant throw one time took off a batter's earlobe. He hit an umpire once in the face mask so hard that it knocked him just clean out during the game. So this guy was throwing some of the highest heat that anyone's ever known while being completely unable to control it. He led the league in both strikeouts and walks in all of the seasons in minor leagues that he played. But catching him almost this whole time is Cal Ripken Sr. Cal Ripken Sr. can handle maybe the hardest throwing pitcher of all time. So because he is so competent as a catcher, unfortunately, he plays himself a little bit because the next year, in 1959, the Orioles need a catcher in their Class D team real bad, so he moves down 2 levels because they just have too many injured people there, and he's like the most competent catcher that's available in the organization. Like, we need someone. Sorry, you gotta go. So he goes to the Pensacola Dons, and he gets there, and it is their final folding season, but he is rewarded for kind of his good service by moving up to Class B this time. He's going to go to the Fox City Foxes in Appleton, Wisconsin. During this time, he is working with the Fox City Foxes initial manager, Earl Weaver. He will continue to work with Earl Weaver for much of his career. Also during this time, in 1960, while he's on the road in Topeka, Kansas for an away game, his wife gives birth to their first child. They name him Cal Jr. after him. Now we've come to 1961. He is going to break camp with the Rochester Red Wings. This is the AAA affiliate. He can taste the majors. He's so close. And then during spring training, he takes in one inning 2 just absolutely horrible foul tips off of his throwing shoulder. He's able to finish out the game, throws out 2 base runners in that game, but it is immediately clear that something is wrong. He tries to gut it through. In fact, in an intra-squad game later that spring training, a coach on the Orioles decides while they're playing this intra-squad game, yeah, I'm just going to have every batter run on Cal if they get on base. He throws out all 8 attempted base stealers in this game. He also reportedly could not pick up a ball the next day. So he tries to fight through 61. It's rough. He is going to get sent down. And the organization loves him. They've always kind of loved his dedication, his work ethic. He's been a good company man. He's done what's asked of him. So they want to try and figure out another way to keep him involved. At this point, he's sent down to Leesburg, and the guy that's managing there, Billy DeMars, is getting promoted. So they say, Cal, player manager. Think about it. Consider it. He says, I've considered it and I'll take it. He immediately becomes a player manager of Leesburg, and just the next year, they go ahead and finish with the highest ever record that they've had, which means that once they then fold after that season, because they were not any longer financially viable, he does get to go back to those Fox City Foxes in Wisconsin. And in their second year, they go ahead and win the pennant, and he wins Manager of the Year. Now we're up to 1965, where he is now with the Aberdeen Pheasants. This is not his Aberdeen, sadly. This is Aberdeen, South Dakota. But even when he's that far from home, he still finds a way to have that little piece of it with him. So he's with the Aberdeen Pheasants, where once again they finish in first, and he wins Manager of the Year at this different level. He's got 9 different future major leaguers, including Lou Piniella, Jim Palmer, and a guy that might not ring as much of a bell to you all, but Mark Belanger. He is a stud defensive shortstop in the history of the Orioles from like the late 60s, early 70s. So all of these guys are getting developed by Cal Sr. because Cal Sr. is about the Oriole way. And this is something that Cal Sr. kind of develops, the concept of the Oriole way. And the Oriole way is very amorphous. He doesn't have books to the same extent of Earl Weaver does, where Earl Weaver like talks through all that. Earl Weaver's got his catchphrase about everything being about the bunts and the 3-run home run. The Oriole way is more just play the right way, practice the right way, compose yourself the right way. Make sure your socks are looking crisp and everything like that. He just beats this into all the players coming through his teams for years and years and years and years. And eventually, after several other stops, let's see, we got Elmira, Washington, Rochester, Asheville, North Carolina, the Dallas-Fort Worth Spurs. That's right, he does find a way to play for the Spurs. And the Tri-City Atoms, which I just thought was a very good moment of the time Cold War team name, the Tri-City Atoms up in Washington. He's helping guys like Jim Palmer come back from a major injury in 1968, which is before much of Jim Palmer's Hall of Fame career. In the 70s, he's really critical in Hall of Famer Eddie Murray being allowed to remain a switch hitter. Eddie Murray has the most RBI by any switch hitter in baseball history. And in 1978, he does have a little bit of influence over a pick that the Orioles make in the draft. With the 48th overall pick, there is a pitching prospect who's dropped pretty low. The reason they decided to take him this high is because while he is viewed as a high school pitching prospect, did also play a little bit of shortstop, and that's actually what the Orioles are interested in. So with the 48th pick in 1978, they do take Cal Ripken Jr., who has now entered the Orioles organization. So it's a hometown thing, and it's a generational thing. We're keeping it in the family, and we're keeping it back in the hometown. He's influential in this in 1978 because by this time he has finally been brought up to the Orioles organization. In 1975, Earl Weaver, who's known him for all of their time during this legacy that each of them have with the org, brings him up initially as a scout, and then in 1977, after a year as the bench coach, he becomes the third base coach, which is the place he will inhabit for much of his time. Will mention, he gets to be the acting manager anytime that Earl Weaver gets ejected. And Earl Weaver is ejected 96 times in his managerial career. So there are plenty of games where Cal Ripken Sr. gets to take over for the latter half of the game. But he's happy to be a third base coach, where he continues very often to be like the guy that is out there with the fungo bats doing fielding. He's the guy out there pitching batting practice. He always finds a way to be involved. And in 1981, he now gets another award for that. He gets to coach his son, Cal Ripken Jr. In 1982, Cal Ripken Jr. wins the Rookie of the Year with his dad watching on. But don't worry, as Cal would tell you, there isn't any father-son relationship here. He goes to point out that he has had hundreds of athletes, hundreds of kids come through his teams while he's been a minor league manager. He says, they're all my sons, more or less. Really tries very hard just to treat Cal as any other player. In 1983, ahead of 1982 season, when they announce this is going to be Earl Weaver's final season, the scuttlebutt all year is that Cal Sr. is the guy that Earl would like to take over at the very least. The problem is, the general manager, Hank Peters, does not like Earl Weaver very much. In fact, it is reported that the kiss of death for Cal Ripken Sr. potentially getting the managerial job was when Earl Weaver said that he probably wanted him to follow after him. Hank Peters decides to spite Earl Weaver and not hire Cal Ripken Sr. He goes ahead and gets Joe Altobelli from the fucking Yankees to be the manager for the Orioles. Just an absolute stab in the back by Hank Peters. It does kind of work out because then in 1983, the Orioles do win the World Series and Cal Ripken Jr. does win an MVP award. So, I mean, there's that. And Cal Sr. stays on as third base coach because, again, he's a good company man. That's the job they want him to do. That's what he's going to do. 84 and 85 are not as good. Altobelli goes about 114 and 103 during that time before they eventually nix him. And for the interim manager, they look around. Who's going to take over? Cal Ripken Sr. on June 14th, 1985. Is going to get his first ever game as manager, serving as the interim manager after Joe Altobelli is fired. They win against the Milwaukee Brewers 8-3. Everyone says that he looks like he had a Christmas morning look on his face. The very next day, Earl Weaver comes out of retirement and becomes the manager of the Baltimore Orioles. So Cal Ripken Sr. gets that one day in 1985, and now Earl Weaver's back, baby. And he's back for all of the 1986 season too. After 86, though, finally, we are going to give Cal Ripken Sr. a true shot at the job that he has been working towards for decades at this point. He is manager of the Baltimore Orioles in 1987. They start out okay, as the Orioles often do, and then they utterly collapse. They go 67 and 95. They finish 6th in the AL East. It was a then team record 51 home losses. It's a pretty brutal season. There is a bright spot, though. On July 11th, just after the All-Star game, Billy Ripken, who we have mentioned in this space before, good old fuckface from his baseball card, Billy Ripken's called up to the team. Cal Ripken Sr. becomes the first ever manager to have two sons on the roster, as Billy takes first with Cal still at short. And later on that season, also related to his sons, Cal is pulled late in the game for Ron Washington as a defensive replacement. This ends a lesser-known Cal Ripken Iron Man streak that he holds of 8,243 consecutive innings played. He does still have his consecutive game streak going on at this time, but he does get taken out for that. Senior says he wanted that monkey off his son's back, so he wanted to give him a break that evening. And that's really the only two things that happened in 1987 that are any good. But you know what? He says we got to preach patience. We're not going to go from first to last super quickly this next year, but we're going to turn things around. Oh no, we have started 0-6 in the 1988 season, and Cal Ripken Sr. is fired. They've seen enough. One full season, 6 more games. No more Cal Ripken Sr. They bring in Frank Robinson, another Orioles legend, figuring this will turn things around. Nope, they lose another 15 straight games. They lose 21 games to start the season. That is still, to this day, the worst start to any major league season in history. That's the 1988 Orioles for you. It's pretty awful. I have seen the second worst start in Orioles history when they went 2-19 to start a more recent year. Really made some history recently. When Cal Sr. is fired, one touching thing, Billy Ripken switches his number from 3 to 7 because he does not want anyone else to wear his dad's number 7. He thinks it would be inappropriate for any other Ripken to have it, so make sure to switch to that. And then after this season, Frank Robinson decides, you know what? I need to get Cal Sr. back as my third base coach. So after Cal is fired by the Orioles for Frank Robinson to come in and replace him, Frank Robinson turns to him and Cal Sr. says, of course I will do this for the Baltimore Orioles. I'm a good company man. And so Cal Sr. comes back. The 1989 season actually a little bit more surprisingly fun. They've got a dynamite switch-hitting catcher named Mickey Tettleton. You know how we Orioles love our dynamite switch-hitting catchers. The next couple seasons, they do not make the playoffs, any of these. They are competitive, but not particularly good. Cal Jr. wins a second MVP award in 92. But after that 92 season, the brass wants to go a little bit younger. They call Cal Sr. up. They say, hey, we have a new job for you. We want you to take over like a really big administrative role in all the minor leagues. There'll still be some time up for you here in the major leagues and all that stuff. But he says, stop. Don't play up this new job to me. Tell me why I'm not working the same job as before. So they cut to the chase. They say, we want to get younger coaches in the system. We want to be developing younger coaches just as we're developing young talent. He says, all right, that's fine. I don't need any other new job then. I'm out of here. And so he dips out. That ends 36 consecutive years with the Baltimore Orioles organization, which is second most all time. There's one other guy who has 37 years. That's a guy named Elrod Hendricks, who's the bullpen coach for the vast majority of that. He and Cal overlap for a number of decades. But with 36 years, it is the second most ever spent with the one organization. Both Elrod and Cal Sr. unofficially have their numbers retired. No one has won 44 since Elrod Hendricks. No one except for Billy Ripken briefly has worn 7 other than Cal Ripken Sr. since Cal Ripken Sr. first donned it. After that, the one thing I'll say compared to your two guys, well, I don't know, Paul Arizin might not have had the best relationship with the Warriors after they move. Cal Sr. does not necessarily have the best relationship with the Orioles after he gets fired from them a couple times, essentially. He does come back a little bit more in the mid-90s because there's a couple important dates for him. On September 5th and September 6th, he makes 2 consecutive trips to Camden Yards in 1995. That is for Cal's 2,130th and 2,131st consecutive game played, tying and then breaking Lou Gehrig's record. He then comes back in 1996 for the Orioles Hall of Fame induction ceremony, in which he, former manager Billy Hunter, and former owner Gerald Hofberger are inducted into the Orioles Hall of Fame. Now, he had another thing that he had done through much of his career early on. He had often been the person that drove the bus for the minor league teams. In fact, when he was made manager of the Fox City Foxes, he had to drive the bus earlier when he was a player. They had just made him do it because they knew that he had a license and had some experience. As a manager, when he came in, the bus leasing company said they would only lease it to them if Cal Sr. drove it because they trusted his driving at that point from their experience. Later on, though, once he didn't have to drive the bus, he was notorious for sitting in the back of the bus. And for a long time, people attributed this to his frosty demeanor. He would always contest, it was not because I was trying to avoid anyone, I just wanted to smoke cigarettes. And I say this because Cal Sr. smoked a lot of cigarettes. And so in 1999, lung cancer does unfortunately claim his life at the age of 65. He does have, at the end of his career, 101 losses. Diaz, I am very sorry. He only has 68 wins.
Oh. You should have let him get one more before they fired him.
That's disqualifying.
It is 169 total games. And real quick, I want to let you know, I knew that I was going to disappoint you with that. So I made sure to find something else. And I am happy to report to you that Billy Ripken's career OPS plus is indeed 69.
Beautiful.
I didn't want to make you feel deprived.
This is the only advanced analytics that I will ever accept is when the number is 69. That's the greatest player of all time, as far as I'm concerned. Now, Billy Ripken. Fuckface.
Between I was gonna say between that and fuckface, like what more do you need? So he was in the Orioles Hall of Fame. I do want to mention he's in one other Hall of Fame, as near as I can tell. In 2004, the Appleton, Wisconsin Baseball Hall of Fame inducted him. That is where the Fox City Foxes played for all those years, while he was both a player, manager, and bus driver. One last thing that I'll leave you with: the Orioles do have a third generation of the Ripken family in there. Ryan Ripken was initially drafted by the Washington Nationals in 2014, but after some surgery and injuries, he was released in 2017, almost immediately signed with the Orioles organization, and he is currently playing in AAA, where I'll be quite honest, I do believe he's going to stay for the foreseeable future, but you know what? That's as far as his grandpa got, so you made it at least that far, and at this point he's got significantly more games at AAA than his grandpa got. So that's Cal Sr. for you, the progenitor of the first family of Baltimore baseball. And despite having to do all of that traveling, he did it for the hometown organization. He did what was asked of him. I'll say it one last time. He was a company man.
I love the full backstory on Senior, obviously. And there is a junior, you know there's a senior. I knew Senior was heavily involved with the Orioles, but there's something tragic about working his whole life to, like, essentially I would assume the day that he was named a player manager in the minor league system, it's like, okay, the end goal here is to be manager of the Orioles one day.
Yeah, like
And so,
I'm making it to the majors one way or another. If it's not going to be a player, then this is how I'm making it to the majors now.
right, and like not even just riding the bus, but literally driving the bus, and then to, I mean, it's a 6 game. Here's where I take issue. If you're gonna fire him 6 games into the season, you fire him before the season starts. 6 games is enough to say enough's enough. Like, come on, you could have gave him one more win.
My thinking was, do you think there's a point in the 15-game losing streak under Frank Robinson where at any point, do we undo it? Like, do we call him back? Was he maybe not as bad as we thought?
Call him up, like, listen, I know we said the classic, it's not you, it's me, but like, it's been 15 more games, and Cal Senior, we think it's us.
Turns out it might actually be me.
I love that. Is it tough for you to feel any positive emotions for an Orioles, Xavier?
No, I don't. I've never had anything against the Orioles, and I personally love hearing James get very excited about Maryland. The only problem I have with Ripken Sr. is the 10+ years of not being in Maryland. Also, he didn't invent the jump shot, which is the only thing that I've been able to think about for the past hour.
He invented the Oriole way, though, Xavier. The Oriole way.
Yeah, but the jump shot is used by billions of people around the world. The Oriole way is very confined.
Are you trying to say that billions of people worldwide don't subscribe to the Oriole way? Because, Xavier, you are living clearly in a liberal elitist East Coast bubble.
The Yankee way. Yeah, shave your beard, Xavier.
Just saying, I am confident that there are more people in the world who know what a jump shot is than know that the city of Baltimore, Maryland exists.
Wow.
I've heard it both ways.
That is a bold statement. I mean, I think this serves as a good launching off point into our litigation.
Oh, we're already there, Diaz. We're already litigating. It's going on.
This is Xavier. It sounds like you could be an Arizin vote.
I am an Arizin vote. Unless I can be convinced otherwise, I am a vote for the person who invented the jump shot, and also, despite being on the 75th anniversary team, might be the least recognizable of those 75 people if you were to talk to even an NBA fan.
That's what I was going to say. Just for argument's sake. Let me pull up the list real quick. The only names that really come close is like Dave DeBusschere.
Dave DeBusschere. No, Nick Legend. I know Dave DeBusschere.
Dave DeBusschere.
That's an oxymoron.
Hey, Dave DeBusschere. The 70s Knicks also had like 7 Hall of Famers on their team when they won those championships. Dave DeBusschere, very, very good player.
Dave DeBusschere is the only other name that would not be instantly recognized by any basketball fan. Like,
unless you're in New York City.
Right. I mean, like, the next closest, least recognizable name is, like, probably Bob Pettit, who still is, like, an all-timer.
Yeah, I think Arizin would be the last
Dave
one.
Bain.
I think that's totally fair. I think if we said that we were trying to not approach someone as high of a stature as we've done, the inventor of the jump shot is up there. But that's definitely below Babe Dietrich and Zaharias, which we have said is the hard cutoff. I think we can agree that is not crossed the line.
Paul Arizin is not one of the 10 greatest athletes of all time.
Paul Arizin is not in the GOAT debate, whereas the
also
Babe...
gym class hero. Intramurals.
I mean, by the sound of it, he's not much of an athlete at all. He just figured out the jump shot.
He got scouted for a school that he was already attending.
That part's pretty good.
That's really good.
I mean, Xavier's doing my job for me. I really have nothing to add. Continue, Xavier. Tell me more about it.
I love Connor Lade, but I could not, in good conscience, vote for my own person for the 4th time in 5 weeks. And also, Paul Arizin invented the jump shot.
I mean, here's what I'll say. If we want to talk hometown bang for a buck, we got 36 years of Cal Senior's career with the Orioles. We have all of Cal Ripken Jr.'s Hall of Fame with the Orioles due to this. We have, I believe, 9 of Billy Ripken's 12 seasons with the Orioles. We have the Aberdeen Ironbirds minor league organization, which exclusively exists because Cal Ripken Jr. decided he wanted a minor league team in his hometown. And the Orioles are like, yeah, sure, whatever you want. You're a Ripken. We just do what you say, except sometimes when we fire your dad.
This is where we fall into the side character angle that we have often discussed here, though. Is the impact, if we're counting those people as part of the impact, yes, that is an incredible impact that Senior is left on Baltimore. But we ain't voting on Junior. We ain't voting on fuckface.
If you don't blame the child for the sins of the father, I think you also can't give the father credit for the things that his Hall of Fame children did.
But at the same time, all the hundreds of Orioles that came through and learned the Oriole way during the only real period of sustained success for this franchise in its entire existence. And all of them were, after all, his sons, one way or another, as he said. Yes, were there 2 sons that did particularly well? I mean, Billy didn't necessarily do all that well. As we said, an OPS plus of 69. Not very nice as an OPS plus.
I do... Listen, I all 3 of us are making the hometown plea here. So I do fully respect that. The only... I don't know why this just struck me, James, but as I look over your left shoulder at the Camden Yards poster, and this isn't even related to Senior, I'm shocked that you haven't made some kind of alteration to it to honor your new wall overlord.
I was at that opening day celebration. It's a moment in history. The wall is love, the wall is life, but also Adley Rutschman is here now. So in some ways, I can let go of the wall and just focus on Adley instead. But right now, you're trying to distract me. I'm here for Cal Senior.
Listen, I respect the play. I really do. But B-Ball Paul, the original one.
You also have to subtract all of the non-Baltimore / Maryland years from Senior. So that
well,
36
funny that he was
goes
in
down
Topeka,
to
Kansas when Cal Jr. was born.
That 36 goes down to what, like 20, 23, 24, which is less than the years that Connor Lade spent in the New York City area. So if he's even below Connor Lade,
He has 17 as a Baltimore Orioles specific employee. Like, not any minor leagues. He has 17 years with the Baltimore Orioles. The other 20 are with minor league organizations.
One thing I just need to touch on, the Fox City Foxes. The fact that has not ever been a Philadelphia Phillies affiliate, which is also a fun turn of phrase now that I just said that, the Philadelphia Phillies affiliate. But the fact that that's not been a thing.
It's a shame that the affiliates don't spell it with a PH.
It should.
That's how your minor leagues should be branded. Hire me, Philadelphia Phillies.
Ugh. The Fightin' Phils, though. I do like the Fightin' Phils with writing, but all this to say, James, I'm sorry, it was a great pitch, but I'm also voting for my guy, Paul.
Well, there's nothing I can do then except make sure that my protest vote is on the record. But hey.
Original basketball, Paul.
The protest vote is logged. However, it is not enough to overturn this split decision that the committee has reached to induct the original B-ball Paul, the inventor of the jump shot. He was never in the mud because he was jumping above it. Paul Arizin, you're already in the NBA Hall of Fame. You're already in the Big Five Hall of Fame. But now we want to welcome you to the Hall of Guy. Welcome, Paul.
Welcome, Air Arizin.
Pitchin' Paul, which, by the way, he said he hated that nickname. But
well, then I'm sticking with Air Arizin. That's a much better nickname anyway. Let's not begrudge him.
I did just invent that today. Nobody ever called him that, to my knowledge, before this podcast just now.
You are an innovator, Justin Diaz, and that's why I can live with losing to you.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Love me some B-ball Paul, man. It's an incredible career, and welcome. Thank you, Paul.
The Ripkens will take this line down. We won't have any issue on Cal's behalf. Cal Sr. will take this decision. Cal Sr. understands the decision. This is what is a committee but a company by another name? And Cal Sr.'s a committee man. He'll live with it.
Whatever the team comes up with.
Whatever the team needs. That's all we got this time, guys. Thanks so much for listening again. I've been James.
I've been the very special guest Xavier.
And I'm Diaz. And as Justin Timberlake once said, it ain't no lie, baby. Guy.
This is just a game.